All right, yo, it's your man DJ Seiko Varner doing the Fly Guys thing. It's Fly Guys podcast, and I have my good brethren on the line. Peace, Aki. What's up, man? How you doing?
I keep peace. Good, man. You showing me out with the vest and tie, man.
Yo, man, it's been like that, man. It's been like that, but it's all good, man. It's a yin and a yang thing going on, man. I'm dressed up. You're dressed up.
Well, it's snowing out here in the Midwest. I know some parts of the South got snow, so it's snowing. So you kind of like got to dress appropriately.
Got you. Hey, look, the topic for tonight, man. I wanted to take one of your topics on one of your famous podcasts. You know, the "Where's My Killa Tape At" podcast. You talked about men ain't insert the S word. You know, you said men ain't shit, man. So, and you kind of threw me with that, man. You really kind of threw me with that. But as I started thinking about it and processing it, I understood what you were saying. So why don't we start off with you describing your point, and then we'll go from there. So why aren't men shit, man?
Well, let me just say real quick that it's something that started on Twitter. And every time, usually, let's say Black Twitter, because white Twitter don't do this, but there's a segment of Twitter called Black Twitter.
Right.
And on Black Twitter, when they discuss street harassment, sexual harassment, sexual assault, rape, there's a lot of men that come on there and they have a hashtag called Not All Men. So then a lot of women took that hashtag in sarcasm and started saying, not all men. And then they would say something that was sarcastic to counter that point. And of course, the ring was, men ain't shit. Like, men ain't shit. Here's why. And people will start chiming in their piece. So, it's very easy for us to say, when you hear a story about sexual harassment, sexual assault, or somebody being disrespectful to women, it's very easy for me to say, well, I don't do that, right?
Right.
And clearly, they're not talking about me, right? If I've never done those things to a woman, they're not talking about me. They're talking about the situation they were in, or their friend was in, or something that happened with news. So they don't really mean us, right? And once again, like I tell my students, if the shoe fits, right? If the shoe fits, then we have a problem. If it doesn't, just keep it moving. And again, it's kind of like racism, right? Our liberation is not predicated on the feelings of white people. So when we talk about things like feminism or, let me just say this, an end to misogyny and sexual assault, when we say those things, that's not predicated on the emotions of a man, right? Like, whether I feel comfortable about it or not, it needs to be discussed. We need to put this out there. So when I say men ain't shit, I mean to say, if there's a problem that we need to fix, we need to first of all own it, right? We need to say, yeah, men ain't shit. And now we have to ask ourselves, meaning the man in the room, we need to say, well, how do we fix that, right? And that's what I mean by when I say men ain't shit. I mean, like, we aren't. We are not, we are not. Just straight up. I can probably give you 1,000 examples of people within our families that are like that. And we have to actually acknowledge that. And then once we acknowledge that, we can kind of fix the issue. Because our sisters are just demanding that we fix the problem, right? They're telling us, hey, we need to fix the problem. But we can't just be the only ones trying to fix the problem. We need y'all to do the same thing too. So that's what I mean by that.
And I've like I said, man, it startled me. It threw me for a second. But I'm at the point now where when I look at what's happening politically, with all the things that are happening with our political figures, with women coming out of the woodworks saying, this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me. What happened to our NBC dude? That happened to me. Even Terry Crews. All right. I'm looking at the situation because what happened to Terry happened by a fellow man. I'm like, wow, man. Wow. So when I hear people say men ain't shit, I can appreciate what you're saying. And your point about we need to acknowledge the problem so we can move forward. How can we move forward?
The first thing we have to do is, and it's funny because like, we kind of like teach our kids this all the time. It's every thing that we learn as an educator, as a parent, as a mentor. It's the same things apply, right?
Okay.
Number one, we need to practice self-discipline, right? So the first thing I have to ask myself when I hear someone talk about let's say for example, street harassment, right? If I hear a young woman or an older woman talk about street harassment, I have to ask myself, before I say I've never done that, right? Because if you watch She's Gotta Have It with Spike Lee, there are examples of street harassment, right? And those are extreme cases, right? But there are other forms of subtle street harassment that we do every day. And I have to ask myself, have I ever done that? And then the second question I have to ask myself, because this is where that's self-discipline, right? Like saying, have I done that? And then really check myself. And maybe I have to ask some people, hey, have I ever done this to you? And and some of them might say, yeah, actually, I've seen you do it. And it's kind of like, that's the self-discipline part. The second thing we need to do is we need to kind of like check ourselves. And what I mean by ourselves, I mean like, I'm my brother's keeper. I need to check my brother, right?
Right.
So the second question, the first question I ask myself there is, have I been in a situation where someone I've known has done something like that? And A, I didn't say something, or B, I encouraged it, right? Because there are times when I'm going out with my friends and they see a young woman and they say, hey, girl, what's up with you? Look at that, whatever, or why don't you smile more?
Right,
and
right.
When that person hasn't responded to them, I'm like, yeah, man, she tripping, man. She tripping. I see how she is, because if we have money or whatever, and I'm encouraging that. And that's the question we have to ask ourselves, because a lot of times we might not have done it, right? But someone we know and care about has done it, and we either never said anything or we encouraged it, right?
Yeah, and I tell you, man, that's been a challenging situation for me. With my frat brothers, just hanging out with some of my friends. I know we've been in a situation, and we're trying to get better at it, I think. As we've matured, the way that we act when we see an attractive woman walk down the street is very different than I think we would have acted years ago. But I still wonder, and I struggle with, did we ever really commit street harassment? Because I struggle with it, man. I really am struggling with it.
Yeah.
So, and I know I've been in situations where the things that they talk about happening on TV with the politicians and with the actors, I saw that stuff happen. And I'm wondering now if my silence allowed it to continue happening, or was I in an environment where that was expected and acceptable? When I had, strip parties and stuff like that, I don't know. We paid the girls to be there. They were there. They responded when we would say, yo, come here, shorty, and stuff like that. But I struggle with it, bro. I struggle with it. So
the key word in that situation when it comes to sex work is consent, right? And I think that, like, let's say, for example, I'm in a stripper party and I tell a girl, hey, girl, come over here so I can slap you in the booty. And she comes over and lets me do it. That's consent, right? That's consent. Now, if she says, no, I don't want to do that, and then I continue, then that's when I overstep my boundaries. Right?
Now, what if I say, yo, come here, shorty, and I smack her on the ass, and she gave consent then, transactionally, she came over there, but then years later, she says, I felt uncomfortable.
Well, and here's the thing. Here's what we have. And I know people have said that. People have said that, like, because I know with the Me Too hashtag that's been online lately, shout out to the sister from New York who just won a big award for that.
Yo, shout out to that Time magazine. Time magazine left her off the cover.
College campuses are now talking about consent. When we went to college, we never said that. That was never discussed, right? So there are people that are coming out saying, well, wow, I was dating this young man, and we had sex Monday night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night. But Thursday night, I didn't want to have sex, but I had sex with him anyway, even though I didn't want to. There was no consent, but we didn't have the terminology for that, right? I'm not saying we should let people get away with it, but it's kind of like, even when I was in my 20s, there was a lot of things, and I'm not saying that it was good for that. I'm not saying that I was right. I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that we didn't have the terminology. I felt, hey, if I'm paying you to do X, Y, Z, then this is what you should be doing for me. And
but look, in your example, if me and Chick had sex Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, she didn't feel like it, but we had sex anyway, and I did not force her, and I didn't chemically induce her to have, isn't there consent there still?
Nope. There's no consent.
If
and that's why, that's why,
that's the crazy part, man, because now she agreed to it physically, transactionally, by allowing us to engage, And now, because she wasn't interested in the first time, you're saying that there wasn't consent. That's the fuzzy line, bro.
And that exactly. And what I'm saying to you is that she didn't have the vocabulary, and we didn't have the vocabulary. Right? Here's an example. I'm gonna come clean on something.
All right.
Like when I first got married, I used to always come home and I used to slap my wife in the ass.
I remember that. You said
right?
it kept her happy. A daily tap to keep her happy.
She did not like that. She did not like that. She told me, she said, hey, at one point she's like, yo, I don't like that. I was sexually harassing her. But see, at the time I didn't have the terminology. I kind of felt like, well, you're my wife. I should be able to do whatever I want to do with you. And you should be cool with it, right? And that's because we didn't have that. I didn't have that terminology of what consent is. She didn't feel comfortable. She actually didn't feel comfortable telling me that because she didn't want to start nothing. You know what I'm saying? Not that I ever came off like somebody that's going to say, oh, get out my face. It's just that it was just uncomfortable to bring it up. There was people.
See, now I would argue. So I would argue that was an uncomfortable situation, but I wouldn't argue that you didn't have consent. Unless she said, "Don't do it."
No, I did not have consent.
Don't do it. Then that's different. Consent. So back to my example: if I have sex with her on Thursday and we had sex together, but she didn't want it, she wasn't feeling it, she wasn't into it, she didn't want to have it, but we had sex and I didn't chemically induce her, nor did I physically force her, you're saying that I didn't have consent.
Correct, because we have to stop looking at rape as something that's forced, right? You can be coerced into it. You can be, tricked into it. You can be, and there have been people who have been raped who like, okay, I'll do this if you leave me alone, and they say, okay. And then the person will say, well, can you do this for me? And then they'll say, okay, I'll do this if you leave me alone. And this is their significant other. It's not a total stranger, but we like to think of rape as something that happens between complete strangers and somebody's forced, like somebody's physically forced. And that's another thing. We have to broaden that because when I was young, I'm gonna come clean. When I was young, I felt that if I took a woman out to eat and to movies or whatever, I was obligated to something, right? And that's not how it works. And that, a lot of us still believe that, and that's not how it works. She doesn't owe me a thing. If I decide to take her out to dinner and a movie, that's something I decided to do. I shouldn't expect nothing in return. So there's a lot of things that we knew, that we thought of 20 years ago that we thought was right, but actually wasn't right. We just didn't have the terminology for it.
I mean, I understand your point about the terminology we didn't have the terminology for it at that time. I still think that in our attempt to right the wrongs of the past, too often we're letting the pendulum go a little too far. And I'm worried about it. I'm not saying it has happened. I'm worried because, as with every revolution, the pendulum goes a little too far before things get corrected. And I'm wondering if we can handle this in a way where everything is corrected and prevented in the future, but we don't let the pendulum go too far. And back to the concept, men ain't shit.
But this is I like these questions because sex is not really about pleasure in these instances, right? It's about power. Right? People like to say, well, for example, with Bill Cosby, they could have said, well, and I know these are extreme cases.
Bad example.
Like, well, he had all this money.
Bad example.
If he had all this money, he could have paid a sex worker consensual sex to do these things. Right?
Okay.
But it's not really about him pleasuring himself in that way. It's about power, right? It's about being able to do it and get away with it, cover it up, shame you. It's really about power. So when you hear somebody like Woody Allen say, well, what am I going to tell a coworker at work if I he didn't say this, but he was like, now we got to be careful at work about what we say. And now you hear people on the internet saying, well, what about if I want to tell my coworker that her dress looks nice, right? And it's really about power. It's not really about making sure that your coworker is in a comfortable workspace. It's not really about making sure your worker is in a non-hostile work environment, right?
But I think it is.
It's about power. And a lot of us are saying, well, I'm worried about X, Y, Z. Trust me, no one, trust me, no one's going to come to me 20 years later and say, hey, when I met you on November 14, 1993, we had sex Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That Friday, I didn't feel like having sex. No one's going to do that, right? No one's going to do that. So
I don't know if that's
what's coming out is, I mean, give me an example. Give me an example in the news. Give me an example of somebody that's saying that.
All right, I can't give you an example. And my point is, I'm concerned that the pendulum is going to swing too far.
Give me an
I
example.
am glad that things are coming out. I'm glad that things are being flushed. I'm glad that these situations where there's a hostile and an uncomfortable work environment are being addressed, because I think everyone should have the equal opportunity to not feel threatened in their work environment or their social environment.
Yeah.
Then I look at situations like with the politician who recently stepped down after he offered one of his aides $5 million to be a surrogate parent for he and his wife. And she said, I felt uncomfortable, so now that's sexual harassment. So now he steps down because of the political pressure around him.
Well, let me say this. Let me say this. If history has shown us anything, is that usually when someone is accused of sexual harassment, whether it's in the political arena or whether it's in entertainment or it's in the nonprofit industry, what I've learned is that one allegation, there's actually 20 other allegations. There's actually 20 other victims that usually never come out. And here's an example. Al Franken. Al Franken had 2 or 3 women accuse him of stuff. And Al Franken actually said, now that you think of it, I don't know how many victims I have. And it's one of those things where, again, I can give you several examples. Harvey Weinstein. And again, I know these are extreme examples.
Bad example.
Heck, I knew somebody at a job that I worked at that when he groped the wrong woman and she dimed him out to HR, 30 women came out and was like, he did the same thing to me, Right. And one thing I've learned is that usually there's one person. Number one, it's not the first time they were accused. They just was able to sweep it under the rug, pay them out, or whatever. Or one person comes out, the other one come out. That's one thing that we have learned. One thing we have learned that's usually what happens.
Right. And that goes along with the men ain't shit idea, man. And I'm kind of
here's the scary part. Here's the scary part. The part is that it's not that you. How should I word this? It's not that you're gonna have, Martin Luther King talks about this all the time. It's not that you have evil people in the world, right? It's that you have good people that don't do anything.
They don't do anything.
And then it's like, not only that, you have people that cover it up, right? People that, and we talked about this before personally, how we talked about for a lot of people, these individuals, their careers are anchored in these individuals, right?
Right.
Al Franken put people on. Bill Cosby put people on. Harvey Weinstein put a lot of people on, right?
African Bambaataa put a lot of people on.
My career is tied to that person. I might have, I might have to take the fall with that person. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure I defend that person,
And that's what happened with our organization, Universal Zulu Nation.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Like, a lot of us were tied to Bambaataa, and it's kind of like, that's why a lot of people are ride or die for him, And that's the scary part. And I think, if the shoe fits, right? If I believe that if you're in the right, you might have to go through some stuff, you're going to be in the right? I think there might be someone that might call you up and say, hey, I remember we did this, and you have opportunity to reconcile with that person, right? I think that's going to happen more so than people going to court, because the reason why a lot of rape victims don't come to court is because they don't want to put that information out there and be dragged. They don't want to live through those moments again. So that's why a lot of victims don't come forth.
All right. Well, the interesting thing that I think that the men ain't shit thing has brought out is not simply dealing with sexual harassment or street harassment. It really seems to deal with all forms of harassment. So if we take the sexuality out,
not just that, but also like, when it comes to child rearing, who does most of the child rearing, even in a situation where there's a, you know, a man and a woman in a household and they both make decent amount of money, we still learn that women do most of the child rearing, right? We still know that women do most of the work. And don't get me wrong, there's exceptions to the rule. I could introduce to at least 4 or 5 men who are stay-at-home dads. Shout out to my man Dita, who's been a stay-at-home dad forever. You know, I could introduce to a lot of guys like that, but most of the child
I mean, you and I both know a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, we both know a lot. And we're in a bubble, because we're in a bubble, right? So, you know, just kind of like reading, like literacy. We're in a bubble where everybody we know reads. So, so we're in a bubble, but there are a lot of people that are not holding it down. A lot of men that are not holding it down. I mean, every time I go into the barbershop, there's always this discussion about child support. And it's just like, well, I think if you have a kid, you should be paying child support if you're not the custodial parent. Plain and simple, you know. And there's a lot of cats out there that are not handling their business. They're just not, you know. So it's just, when we say men ain't shit, we mean it across the board, not just dealing with issues with, you know, sexual harassment, et cetera, just across the board.
I agree. We definitely have a lot of shit we got to clean up across the board. The piece you just brought up about with the child support is dangerous and as challenging as that system is towards normally the fathers. But although I've seen
black men
and black men in general, I do see too many times where the decision of that father not to be as responsible as they should has led to the exaggeration and the overemphasis, which has led to the destruction of other fathers. Does that make sense? Because we had 3 or 4 fathers who really ain't doing nothing, then the other 7 fathers have a harder time dealing with the system because the system is set up primarily for those 3 fathers who are the total problem.
No, let's be clear. The prison industrial complex was created to put black and brown men in jail and women. That's the primary directive of the prison industrial complex. Whatever they can do to lock us up, they're gonna figure it out.
Right.
You know, they're gonna figure it out. So that I'm not even trying to ignore that. I'm not even trying to discuss. I'm not even trying to say, "Oh, don't worry about that," because that's a serious issue. I do think it's stupid to lock somebody up for child support and then expect them to pay child support. I think that's ridiculous, right?
Right.
Stupidly ridiculous, right? Or take away their driver's license or take away their passport, because some states will take away your passport.
Right.
I think there should be alternatives to how it's done.
And they do it without proof.
The state of Virginia has a fatherhood initiative. I know the state of Ohio has a fatherhood initiative. And I think that there should be more programs in place to help fathers, especially young fathers, deal with, you know, just child rearing in general, right? Because let's be clear, most moms are not saying, we have a kid together, we should, you know, give me the money. They're saying, we have a kid together, let's share in the child rearing, you know? Because I know many moms who are like, single moms who are like, yo, you know, I don't have to pay for daycare. He pays for daycare. And he picks them up after daycare and drops them off at the house. That just works out for me.
Right.
You know, and I think, you know, there's just so many different ways we can work it out. But one thing I will say is, when it comes to mentoring, and I'm guilty of this, I'm super guilty of this, I don't really emphasize the fatherhood part of that, right? I'm not really giving them the tools to say, oh, you're going to have a kid with this woman. Well, this is the things you need to learn and know about. I personally, but once again, self-discipline, and I am a brother, I have to put more things in place when it comes to my mentees about how to be a father. You know what? Not just show by example, but say, hey, you might want to do this. You might want to do that. You might want to do this. You might want to keep the receipts. You might want to do that. Hey, you might want to just pay for daycare and then, you know, have her cover that. You might want to take turns picking them up and dropping them off here. Like, there's so many different little things that we can do for them. And I don't see that happening in an informal level.
I agree. And one of the things that happens in our community is when a woman becomes pregnant, women rally around her. And, you know, they're giving her support. Hey, if you need to do this, I got you on this. They're buying diapers. You know, there's a whole support system that pops out. But when fathers are becoming fathers, you know, when their mother, you know, the mother of the child is going through the pregnancy, we really don't rally around fathers the way we should. And I think that has led to some of the
problems. And I'm super guilty of that. You know, I'm super guilty of that. I'm super like, hey, you know, whenever you need anything, just give me a call. I don't like set anything up to like really support. I agree.
Yeah, I used to do a podcast. Matter of fact, I'm clicking on it now, Daddy Man Radio. And on Daddy Man Radio, I used to talk to fathers about, three of the most blessed times in their lives and three of the most challenging times in their lives. And I had a guy named Ralph Slaughter who talked about how child support takes 65% of his income.
Wow.
And this one is really interesting. Coach JJ, he had child support placed on him. He started working for the Child Support Enforcement Agency, and he gives a lot of great information on steps, on strategies that fathers can take so that they don't get trapped in the child support system. They had another guy that talked about having two women pregnant at the same time. But we need to have these informal discussions. We need to create a support system for fathers as we're becoming fathers, because the sisters have theirs. And if our system doesn't work for us, they're going to talk shit about us. You know what they're going to say? Men ain't shit.
Yeah, truly. And ultimately, it's not, what I tell a lot of young people, I do tell a lot of fathers that I don't really like, for example, I had the hashtag hug life, right? I've had that for years. Yep. It's not really about me changing the image of black and brown fathers. I'm not in that business. That's because you know what? They're going to be people that are going to think how they're going to think no matter what
we do.
You put in front of you. Right. Because I know 2 years ago, I'm trying to remember which magazine, they came out and they said that black fathers are actually more affectionate to their children than their Latino and white counterparts. And I'll send you that article. Yeah. And it's like, but at the same time, I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. And that's something that I've witnessed, right?
Who said that?
I'm not in the business of making you like me as a black father or a brown father. Like, that's not my business. My business is take care of my community. That's the business that I'm in, and making sure people in my community have the tools that they need to help to uplift their community. That's it. So because I know a lot of times people say, well, it's stereotype, and I'm like, I'm not even in that game. Like, that's, I don't do PR. I'm not hating on anybody's PR, but that's not the game I'm trying to win.
Got you. Well, after you put out your podcast and you famously said men ain't shit, and you talked about the hashtag, what were some of the responses that you've received from your listeners?
What's funny? I've gotten a lot of positive responses, and this is male privilege, right? This is male privilege.
All right.
As a man, I can say certain things, and other men will be more likely to either listen, or if they don't agree with me, they won't say anything. But I know that if, say, for example, if Feminista Jones, a good, Feminista Jones said it, she will get all kinds of trolls. And a lot of it has to do with because she's a woman, and a lot of those guys out there are cowards.
But it's
funny because the people that do engage me, it's actually a fruitful debate. It's actually a very fruitful debate that I've had with people where we discuss and go back and forth, and it's very fruitful and respectful. But a lot of my women comrades, they don't get the same. But I've been getting a lot of positive feedback. I wish I had more men engage me, even if they disagree with me. I wish I had more men engage me, because that's who I'm trying to reach. That's who I'm trying to reach. I'm not trying to reach women, or I'm trying to reach men. That I want them to actually start to question themselves and really start that self-discipline process and really start asking those questions.
I agree. Well, you know what? I'm still a fan of your podcast. And I love the fact that we have these conversations about things that you bring up on your show. One of the last things I want to talk about before we, cut things off today is I want to leave with some suggestions or some strategies. I want to make sure that the listener gets an ROI, return on their investment. So since men ain't shit, what are some things we can do so we can start cleaning up that shit?
Okay. Number one, there's a good book by Kevin Powell. It's called Who's Gonna Take the Weight? Now, it came out a couple years ago. It's actually about a decade ago.
Yeah.
It's called Who's Gonna Take the Weight? And it's about a couple of essays. It's a couple of essays. And then he really asked those questions. So that's the first thing I suggest reading, right? Because the only way we're going to fix it is by reading and researching. But I think the second thing we need to do is really start evaluating. And I think, to be honest, as a man, as an adult, you should have already been doing the self-evaluating process while you were in college. Like evaluating yourself consistently, like revisiting the things that you believe in and that you know and that you've been taught, revisiting those things, you should already be doing that. So if you're not, if you are, do it a lot more deeper. If not, start really thinking about some of the harmful things you may have done to other people, whether men or women, right? Really start questioning those things. The music that we listen to, right? Some of the most famous music that we listen to is very misogynistic, very, very misogynistic. So we need to really start revisiting. And let's have those discussions, right? Let's really have those discussions. And really, if you say you about it, if you say you for your community, if you say you for your upliftment of people, I think it's high time that we start listening to the women. Like, really, what are your grievances? And ask them. Go to your, your soror, go to your coworker, go to your friend, your mentor who's a woman, and ask them, and trust me, they will open up. And then one thing I do at both my jobs, I work with young people. The question I always ask myself when I leave is I ask myself, is this place safer now that I'm leaving it? And a lot of times that answer is no. Right? A lot of times that answer is, some days is yes, but a lot of times the answer is no, it's not safe for me leaving it. So we have to do that. And then whatever work whatever lane that you're in, any lane that you're in, whether you do economic empowerment, whether you do mentoring, whether you do health and fitness, whether you do, spiritual uplift, in all those lanes, we need to clean up all those lanes, So find out what's going on. Talk to people. Find out, whether you're in a church or whether you run a gym, find out, because some of those places are hostile to our women, and figure out how to fix that out, fix it up. So I hope that's enough. I know it's a lot.
That's enough. And man, I appreciate having you on. Love you, brother. Love your family. It was so good to see y'all on Thanksgiving, man. That was hot.
Brother, I love you too and your family. Tell everybody that said what's up and kiss the babies for me, man.
I'll do that. All right, man. So stay fly. Peace.
All right. Peace.